King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into a blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of his strongest soldiers in the army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace so hot, that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that were tied up and thrown into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like the son of a god, a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, what happened in this chapter is King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream in the previous chapter, about his kingdom, and he saw a statue that was made out of different elements throughout his body. And the head was made of gold, which represented him and his kingdom, which was a very prominent kingdom, and it was flourishing. And he ignored the fact that the dream was actually telling him about things to come and his kingdom pretty much being divided and taken over. He just saw the part about his kingdom being flourishing. So he took that gold head and decided to make a whole statue out of it. And not only did he make that statue, he wanted all the people of his kingdom to bow down and worship that statue. Every time he played, he got his people to play music. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down and worship this idol over their true God. So the king had already issued his decree on what would happen to the people that didn't bow down. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not exempt from that ruling. So they got thrown into the fire. And notice how that they said King Nebuchadnezzar's attitude toward them changed. He really liked them at first when he thought they were doing what he wanted them to do. But when they disobeyed him, and especially when it came to his God, lowercase g, his idol, and their true God, his attitude changed toward them, and he got angry with them and threw them in the fire. And that fire was so hot it leaped out and took his strongest guards that were throwing them in the fire, took their lives. So that fire was very hot. And then he said, they were in the fire. Then he said, look, there's 4 people in there. And that's believed that was an angel in there protecting them. Or it may have even been a manifestation of Jesus Christ himself in there protecting them. But their faith saved them. They honored God. God honored them. And the king called them back out of there. They came out. Nothing was burned on them. They didn't have a smell of smoke on them. The only thing that got burned off was their binding. And when they came out, the king still, this is the tricky thing with King Nebuchadnezzar, he's still not declaring God as the God. He's still saying the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or the God of Daniel. And that's going to get a little more interesting further in this book. So the king did end up making a new decree for all those that didn't want to worship the idol and they wanted to worship the true God. So he's kind of getting it, but not quite yet. Okay, I'll be reading chapter 4 next. Thank you for listening. Bye.